Greetings and welcome to our next big section, which is chapters 4 and 5 in the textbook. We will deal with it as a unit divided into shorter segments. The topic is libel, which we will, in this first part, discuss pretty much in terms of the definition. When we talked about the First Amendment, we talked about the fact that freedom of expression has limits that were defined pretty much as how we discussed them, either being outside of the scope of the First Amendment, such as incitement or national security or obscenity, or being subject to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions that were content neutral. Otherwise, we said that there are no constitutional restrictions on freedom of expression. But one of the things that we said was that if the use of free expression causes actual harm to another, then that's actionable under the law. And that's what the law of libel, sometimes called defamation, is about. Initially, let's understand that there are two words in the English language. Libel, L-I-B-E-L, is the word that we use to describe the specific legal offense. Liable is a word, L-I-A-B-L-E, that means responsible. But what we're talking about here is something in the legal context. It's a tort. You may or may not have heard the word tort before. You've heard of tort lawyers. A tort comes from the Greek word for wrong. It basically means that a person who has been wronged can institute an action to recover damages. There are all types of torts, and there are many torts: intentional infliction of emotional duress, damage, personal injury, wrongful death. All these fall under the general headline of, or the general label of, a tort. What they all have in common is that they are legal causes of action or sets of facts that have occurred or alleged to have occurred that injured another person in such a way that money damages are due to the person who is asserting that he or she was injured. Sometimes you will hear libel referenced, and sometimes in the text it's referenced as defamation. That's a good word to use to understand what libel is, because it means defame or remove a person's fame, or cause people to think less of a person. But we have to be careful in using that term, because defaming a person is protected by the First Amendment, absent some other circumstances. And that's what, if those other circumstances are present, then that's when a libel has occurred. Injury to reputation or defaming a person is not the same thing as libel. In these cases, they start with, as we discussed, a plaintiff who says, "You hurt me." Specifically something you printed, something you published, something you said, something that was done, some form of communication initiated by you caused me actual harm. Therefore, I am entitled to be compensated for the damage you have caused. And money, as we may have mentioned earlier, may not cure the problem. If take a personal injury case where someone actually has been hurt, broken leg or something like that. Well, the money is not going to make their leg be unbroken. The pain of the injury and the actual injury remain, but money is what we have to compensate when somebody else causes us harm, breaks our leg, or whatever. The defendant is on the other side of the presentation saying, "I didn't do this. You're falsely accusing me of causing you harm," or "if you were caused harm, it wasn't because I did it. There are many defenses to charges of libel, and we will certainly go through those. I want to spend a few minutes talking just about how important reputation is in our society. I mean, it's always been important. Our mothers told us, your reputation is all you have. Your good name is all you have. But in modern times, that's exceedingly important both for individuals and for products and services. If you are a marketing major, you are very much into helping someone who's offering a product or a service build, monitor, correct, reinforce, manage their reputation, manage with a public perception of their product or service. Obviously, a good reputation results in good things, and a bad reputation causes adverse results. So reputation is exceedingly important, not just because our moms told us was, but in terms of dollars and cents. If a hotel chain, if a restaurant chain, if an airline, if a product, potato chips, soda, or whatever, how the public feels about that, what its reputation is in the marketplace, is a valuable commodity. Personally, your reputation is what paves your way in your career. Is this a person who knows what she's doing? Is this a person who's able? Is she dependable? Does she work well with others? All these types of things. It's not so much, do I have a degree in this, or do I have a certificate that says I can do it, but is your reputation such that people want to know that they can rely on you to do what it is you says you're able to do. Business reputation is the same way. Brand identity, it's actually as valuable as anything, any other aspect. We'll talk later about trademark and copyright and intellectual property and the value of intellectual property. But believe me when I tell you that brand identity is valuable, and you know this because you're a consumer, and you go by brands every day in ways large and small. Your selection of the University of Mississippi as your college was based in part, at least, on its brand identity in your mind that was developed through various interactions with the university. So these are extremely valuable, albeit intangible, ways of setting value. It is a commodity. If you think about the money that a product or service puts in establishing goodwill, whether it's a bank or a candidate for office or something like that, they trade on their reputation, is the saying. And if that reputation is injured falsely, then and they lose money and standing, then that's the root of what a libel action is for. It gives a person who is falsely injured by false information a way to try to recover. You'll hear from time to time people talking about libel and slander, and some people, I saw something on social media, some expert was talking about, well, libel is in writing and slander is spoken. Well, actually, no, not really. We just use the term libel or defamation. Slander goes back to the 1600s, and we don't go there. Another thing that goes back to the 1600s, and perhaps there was some of this on Downton Abbey, I don't remember. It was criminal libel. A person who could be locked up for making false statements that were injurious about another. In the early years of the United States, up to really not too terribly long ago, falsely spreading false information about another person could result in a criminal penalty. That no longer exists, but we do have civil remedies, meaning an injured plaintiff can seek money damages. Now, freedom of expression, we started talking about that at the beginning of this segment, and we continue to insist that it's there. There's no prior restraint. In most cases, a person can publish, can say, can print, can distribute all types of information. That's allowed under the First Amendment. But if actual harm results from the distribution of that information and it's false, then there's accountability for causing the real damage to a person's reputation. Reputation is the interest that's being protected in libel law. And as I've said, and I'll say again, reputation is a very valuable commodity. Now, we have to bring in social media in this conversation initially, because it's the reality of our lives. And what social media has done across a lot of things is make things easier and make them faster and make rumors and spread faster. And it's made the copying and pasting a lot easier. False information can be spread very rapidly, but the law doesn't change. If it's libelous on a printed newspaper in 1925, it's libelous in a text or an email or a tweet. There are jurisdiction issues because social media doesn't have any geographic boundaries. You know, we talked at the beginning about how courts have to have power over the subject matter and over the people. Well, there's no court in the United States that has power over a person in Japan or in England or in Germany or in Haiti or in any other foreign nation. So if a libel originates overseas, then there are jurisdiction issues about how would you get a remedy. But the pre-internet rules still apply for the most part. They're just a little bit more challenging to enforce the law of libel. A common problem that occurs in libel arena as well, and this is more of a practical consideration, is that in the ebb and flow of commerce, and when people are having discussions or whatever, it'll pop up like, well, you go ahead, you say that or you do that, and I'll sue you. Well, when that is said to a publisher of a magazine or a newspaper or a television station, it gives them pause, because it's very expensive to defend a lawsuit, even if you're right. And it can chill freedom of expression. I think the text, or there may be a case from California where a newspaper had discovered that a subdivision developer had desecrated a cemetery or caused some unnecessary pollution. And when the journalist, the reporter, contacted the contractor about that, the contractor said, okay, well, you go ahead, you print that, and I'm going to sue you. I did it, but I guarantee you that it's going to cost you $1 million to print it, you know, if you publish it, and I'll tie you up in court forever. That's a legitimate threat. And some jurisdictions have what they call strategic lawsuits against public participation. That is a way of protecting people if a person threatens to sue because you might use your freedom of expression, then that in itself is a separate tort. That's a little bit difficult to prove. It doesn't exist in Mississippi. What we have is a common law tort called malicious use of civil prosecution. Now, the problem with that is that you have to wait until the case is initiated. In this case, by the contractor, it comes to a complete end, and then if it's found that the contractor's case had absolutely no merit. It was just a harassment. It was using the courts to delay publication or to cause problems for somebody who wanted to use a First Amendment right. Then it's possible to countersue them after the end of the first case and recover damages. That's pretty difficult and pretty rare. So we talk about libel law, and we talk about it in our context is usually media practitioners, advertising that is libelous, news editorial content that's libelous. But again, the law is not specific to the platform. The law just says if it contemplates that somebody, some entity, has injured another person's reputation. And if all the elements of libel are met, then the person who is injured is entitled to recovery. Okay, we'll stop there, and in the next segments, we'll start going through the specific elements of proof in libel cases.